7 weeks is going to be called Stamp Stories. Now, I've been approached by about 3 or 4 people already this morning, right? And they say to me, how's Mrs. Isaacs? Would you like coffee? No. They say, my uncle died and left me stamps. How much are they worth? And stamp collecting is a very interesting thing. It's almost like, it's 2018 right now, and normal people don't collect stamps. It's kind of like something that maybe like your father or something did, you know, or like we did in the 50s or something. It's kind of a lost art. It's a very odd thing. And so I'm not really going to be talking about the value of your stamp collection today. Instead, it's going to be, I'm going to talk about kind of the stories behind the postage stamps. And today, we're going to go through, well, you'll see what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about what does it take to be on a postage stamp, which I think is kind of an interesting thing. So with that, let's get going here then. This stamp here is one of the most famous American. This is a misprint, and this stamp is worth like $2 million, right? The Flying Jenny stamp. So it was an error.
Upside down.
Yeah, upside down stamp. So this is worth. This is like, you know, people talk about stamp collecting. If anybody, your uncle left you a stamp collection. If you have one of these stamps, I'll give you $5 for it. Mrs. Isaacs will give you the money. She's got the money right. No, so it's worth like, you know, $1 million, whatever. All right. Well, okay. Where have I been? I just got back from Kansas and Oklahoma. Yeah. So my parents live in Norman, Oklahoma, and so I went out there to see them for the last week. So I've been in Oklahoma, and I thought, all right, well, Oklahoma stamps. So this is the musical Oklahoma. This is what people in New York think Oklahoma. You know, you get off on the, you know, you stop the train, you get to shoot the buffaloes, and then people, oh, Oklahoma, right? So here's Oklahoma, right? And this is an interesting stamp. This is a commemoration stamp for the statehood of Oklahoma. Oklahoma became a state in 1907. Isn't that odd? You know, I mean, 1907. Like, I mean, that's like last week. I mean, it's a very young state. So here, look at this stamp. Arrows to Adams, 1957. So today you probably wouldn't have a stamp like this, you know, celebrating atomic power. You know, a very odd thing.
3 cents.
But what's that?
3 cents.
Oh yeah, 3 cents. That's another, you can sort of tell the date of stamps by looking at the
Yes.
price of the postage stamps. I'll throw a graph up
And
there.
how old we are, because we remember 3 cents.
Yeah, all right. So here's another interesting Oklahoma stamp. It used to be called IT, Indian Territory. And these are the 5 so-called civilized tribes. And when you go to Oklahoma today, they have about 60 casinos run by the Indians. And of the 5 civilized tribes, the Chickasaw Nation, these people are unbelievable. They're from Alabama and Mississippi. Andrew Jackson, you know, did the Indian Removal Act. And the head of the Chickasaw Nation, he's an MBA degree, a finance guy, and he's been the head of the nation for maybe 40 years now. And they use the money from the casinos, and they have schools, museums, free medical care. I mean, it's really well done. Not all the tribes manage the funds successfully, but the Chickasaw Nation, outstanding. And so anyway, it's kind of interesting. And this is again this is the Oklahoma state flag, right? Oklahoma bird, right? So you can learn a lot about your state just by Google, like key in New York, you know. And there's all kinds of stamps relating to New York. So kind of an interesting way to learn. Now, where else was I was in Kansas, right? Now, why did I go to Kansas? Well, I like Teddy Roosevelt. So I'm reading about Teddy Roosevelt, and then they talk about this guy, William Allen White. So William Allen White was the editor of the Emporia Gazette. He died in 1944. And I thought, this is an interesting thing. He wrote 2 famous editorials. One is called What's the Matter with Kansas? And this is for the 1896 presidential election. He was a Republican, progressive Republican. He supported Teddy Roosevelt, the Bull Moose Party in 1912. And so he's on his way to the editorial office, and he got accosted by populist people. That would be like Antifa people today. They were like throwing things at him and yelling at him. So he wrote a famous editorial called What's the Matter with Kansas? And basically he said, why is it the population of Kansas is declining? Why is it that we don't have industrial development? It's because these populists are out of control. And remember, populists and progressives are not the same thing. Right? Progressives are a reaction against the populists, right? The Midwest populists, right? So this editorial gets picked up on the wire services. So he became a national celebrity because of this editorial, and he had offers to move to New York, become an editor, and this sort of thing. Instead, he stayed in Emporia, Kansas his entire life. His other famous piece is called Mary White. His daughter was 18 or 19 years old, and she fell off a horse and died. And he wrote a beautiful editorial about her, you know, like an obit editorial. He's a famous, you know. So I'm like, William Allen White, this is fantastic. So instead of landing in Oklahoma City Airport, I landed in Kansas City. And I had this thing planned out for 2 years. Right? I'm going to drive, get a rental car, drive to Emporia, Kansas. I stayed in a Motel 6. I wake up, 9:30, the William Allen White House opens. So I'm here, so I read the autobiography of William Allen White. Here's Teddy Roosevelt in Emporia visiting William Allen White. So I'm all set, I want to go see this. And this is his house. The State Historical Society of Kansas runs it, it's called Red Rocks, and I'm going to go on a tour of this house. This is the porch where Teddy Roosevelt stood, right here, right? I'm all set to go. I get there, closed. What a loser. 2 years, and why are they closed? Well, because in the state of Kansas they had budget cuts, so they shut down all the historical sites. So it's open like Friday and Saturday, and not during the week. And I was there like on a Tuesday or something. So it's like, what an idiot, right? So let me go back here. So William Allen White, so biography of his life in Emporia. This is Teddy Roosevelt, who visited him. Emporia is right on like the Atchison, Topeka, Santa Fe railroad line. So we stopped there, we visited. Very interesting. He was good friends with Teddy Roosevelt. And of course, Teddy Roosevelt stamps him. He's a popular figure, a real American character. So here he is. And what else did I do? When I landed in Kansas City, I went to the World War I Museum. Right? This is the National World War I Museum. Last year, at this time, I had the World War I class, because it's the 100th anniversary of World War I. Like, what's the date right now? September what? September 14th, 1918, right now, this moment, from now until November 11th, was the bloodiest time of American involvement in World War I. And during the month of October, it's like having a 9/11 every day. That's how many men died. So, you know, you should like think about that in this, you know, days between now and November 11th. So this museum, unbelievable museum. I wanted to go here last year to get prepared for the class, but of course, you know, I couldn't leave Rhinebeck or something. So, but I went there this year. It was on my to-do list. And what a great thing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mark, if you run out of stamp stuff, can you finish World War I, please?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what I did. So this thing, this was built in 1921 to honor the World War I soldiers that were killed from Missouri and Kansas. Oh. And they said, we need money. They raised $15 million in like 2 weeks, and that's in 1921 money. And they built this beautiful memorial here. And down the hill is Union Train Station in Kansas City. It's a famous train station. And so the World War II guys that were going off to war would look out of the train and see this monument for World War I on the way. And around 2000, the foundation was falling apart, and so they built a museum underground. So they have, if you've been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, it's sort of like that in presentation of material. There's 300,000 artifacts in the museum. Unbelievable museum. And now, what's this? Of all the 300,000 artifacts, this is the one that's the most chilling artifact of the entire place. What is it?
German Luger?
No, this is a Browning automatic pistol, and it was Browning is United States. It was licensed to a gun maker in Belgium. And this is the gun that was used to kill Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie. This is the guy, Princip, that did it. So that gun led to the deaths of 11 million people. I'm standing there looking at that going, what the heck? And it's small. It's like, maybe like this big. It's like a little tiny gun.
Oh, it is.
And the guy wasn't a good shot. It just, you know the story where
It's like he's right up against it.
the Black Hand terrorists tried to kill Archduke Franz Ferdinand with his wife Sophie. Earlier in the morning, they threw a bomb and it didn't work. So he's sitting in a coffee shop drinking coffee. And the chauffeur took the wrong turn and went down the wrong street, and he saw them, ran outside and popped them like this. And 2 shots, 2 kills. They were both killed instantly. And then, so of course, there's a stamp to commemorate that, right? And again, what an awesome thing. This is what stamps are good for. I was talking to one of the faculty members of the CIA yesterday. And have you talked with 18 and 19-year-olds lately? I talk to them all the time. Yeah, it's like, wow, you feel really old, right? How can you tell an old person? We have wristwatches. And let me see the pen for a minute. And this is what you can't give them like essay tests because they hold their pens like this when they write. It's unbelievable. You look across the room, it's like, what the heck is this? Did anybody go to Catholic school? And then you say, all right, this is the textbook, and I want you to read another book and write it. Like, they don't read books, right?
Yeah.
So they don't read, and they don't know what a newspaper is. So I say, well, I'll bring in the Wall Street Journal, I'll hold it up so you can see what it looks like, a historical artifact, right? They get everything online, right? So 18 and 19-year-olds are image-driven. So what does that mean? They like the pretty pictures. So postage stamps are particularly useful in they take a historical moment and they boil it down to an image, right? And I think back, do I love history? I love history, right? Why? Because my first memories are postage stamps, of all things. Pictures of people, and you're like, who's that person? Well, who is this? I'm like 5 or 6, 7, 8 years old when I first remember looking at postage stamps, thinking, what an intriguing thing. So for people, young people, ironically, people don't collect stamps today. It's not really it's kind of a dying hobby. But we live in an image-driven world. So these images really capture like little pithy moments of what history is. And it's a good way to remember, right? And what is history anyway? History is story, right? Okay? So if you want to be a history major, you have to read books and read the primary sources and the stories that go along with the people and pictures and that sort of thing. So anyway, so that's what stamps are good for. All right, what's this? It was September 11th. A couple days ago, right? 17th anniversary. And so this image becomes a famous stamp. So it's kind of like the flag raising at Iwo Jima. I'll show you that stamp when we get down the line a little bit. This is an image that when you think of 9/11, this is what you think of, right? Amazing. Now, what's this? This is my first stamp album when I was a kid. And of course, yes, I was an artist even then. I had to draw a mustache on the guy. And that's an example of my handwriting. At least I hold the pen the right way. Right? So this is my first stamp album. And this is one of the first stamps I remember, the Project Mercury stamp. I know you remember this one?
Yes.
You had the Sputnik, right, 1957, and it launched a big thing, a big push. We have to educate American kids in science. So it's the big science push, right? And then the space program kind of captivated the whole imagination of that whole generation. And, John Glenn and Shepard and all these astronauts were like big celebrities, So this stamp, I will always remember that stamp, right? Now, this is another stamp that it's really a great and a famous American image. If you think of an American stamp, this is it, the Statue of Liberty stamp. And of course, it's also available in this one, the 8-cent one is more common than the 11-cent one. But what a great image, In God we trust and liberty. It's amazing how you can kind of capture the American spirit in like a picture, one picture. That's what these stamps are good for. Go ahead.
I just have a question about where you got these images.
Oh, if you get on Google.
Yeah.
I've been working on this class for 6 months or 8 months. See, the bar, LLC, like they're already harassing me about what am I going to do next spring. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do this afternoon. I have no idea. This is the great planning and administration we have. It's fantastic, right? I'm not going to organize, right? So I kind of a random collection of stamps. And this is fun stuff. We're going to look at like these individuals later on here as we go on. But it's a real slice of Americana, right? Now, of course, the question is, well, how do you get to be on a stamp? I look good on a stamp. How do you do this? Well, we'll talk about. All right, now, so what's this? This is one of the great ironic stamps of all time. Our country was founded by rebellion against the Stamp Act, and what do? We have a whole class of stamps, thousands of American stamps, right? And they even have a stamp commemorating the repeal of the Stamp Act. That's ironic, right? Very strange thing, right? And not all stamps are postage stamps. Do you remember this when you were a kid? It's an unbelievable thing. My mother, my parents are like products of the Great Depression, right? They're very thrifty. And she probably is still collecting with these green stamps to this day. I remember, like, okay, where are we going? Marky and my sister Mary, we load up in the car, we drive for like 12 hours, we get to the S&H Green Stamp Redemption Center, and there's all these books, like all these books, and here's your toaster, What are they worth, like 0.001 cent per thousand or something? So not all stamps are, so we're not really going to talk about green stamps today. Talk about stamp collecting in general. They even have stamps commemorating stamp collecting, which I think is fascinating. We'll talk about Benjamin Franklin. I like this one. That's me. Young Dr. Isaac's working on a stamp collection. Of course, these stamps are all pasted down straight. Mine were a little out of whack, out of whack there, So these are great stamps. I like these. So the post office wants to encourage stamp collecting. Why? Because they sell stamps, right?
What date are they?
These I think are like 1980 stamps. You can tell by the 22 cents. I should get a chart. In fact, I'll try to do that next week. You can plot out. You can tell the date of the stamp by the amount that they charge for the stamp. Well, what are stamps now? Like 49 cents? 50 cents? Yeah. Go ahead, ask me. Does this annoy me? Go ahead, say it. I'm glad you asked that question. How many post offices are there? Like every town has one? Okay. So they charge like 47 cents for a stamp, or 51 cents for it. It's like, you know what? Charge even numbers, like 50 cents, 55 cents. Why is that? Think about this. All the post office, they're counting pennies out like this. You're like, here, round it up to the nearest nickel, right? Yeah, use a credit card. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, not like it's real money. No, so although, and the reason they do that is by law, they're not allowed to make a profit or something, so they can't charge like 50 cents, 55 cents, 60 cents. They have to charge 51 cents or whatever. Is it 50 cents now?
Yes.
Oh, this is a fantastic thing. I hope it stays that way. Right?
Well, it's forever stamp.
Yeah, forever stamp. That's even better. Right? All right, now, one of the most famous stamp collectors in the world is Franklin Roosevelt. And of course, he's our local president. When I teach at the CIA, right? So we have students from all over the country. So what do? I bring them to the FDR estate. First of all, they've never heard of FDR. They're not aware of the Great Depression, never heard of World War II. So I bring them there, and they walk around and they're amazed that there's such a thing. They don't seem to teach history in school these days, so they're completely like they're born yesterday, right? How now mooncalf? Yeah, that's them, right? So you bring them there. So Franklin Roosevelt. So he was a great stamp collector. Now why did he collect stamps? Because he had polio in 1921. He couldn't walk. Are you happy now? Right? So this was something he could do at his desk that wasn't work related. What did Winston Churchill do? He was a bricklayer and he painted to relieve stress. So he worked on his stamp collection. So he's a very famous. Here he is working on his stamp collection. Now,
He had a piece of the stamp collection with him when he died.
is that true?
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
From his childhood right all the way, and he always had a piece of his collection with him. But they
Yeah.
auctioned off many of his stamps.
Well, yeah, that really makes you cringe, right? What happened to his stamp collection?
Most of them was
The
auctioned
family sold it and kept the money. You're like, what? I mean, you could tell a lot by a person's art that they collect or their stamp collection. You can tell about the person by looking at the stamps that they surround them, the books that they have around, you know. That's why I like to go to William Allen White's house and look at his books on his shelf. I went to Ralph Waldo Emerson's house in Concord, you know, and it says, please do not touch Mr. Emerson's books. Of course, I had to touch his books. But you can see the books that the person, same thing with the stamp. So it would have been, historians are like livid that the family sold the stamp collection, and I don't know what they got for it, but whatever they got for it wasn't enough, right? So anyway, here he is collecting stamps, and there's all kinds of great FDR stamp stories. We don't have time to go into them all. One of them was that people from all over the world knew that he collected stamps, and they sent him stamps. So he had like a worldwide stamp collection. James T. Farley, you know who he is? Farley, right? He was from New York, and Farley was the guy who was probably responsible for getting Roosevelt elected in 1932. He was his campaign manager, genius guy. He had about a 6th grade education, but he read a lot and he knew people. So he would meet you once, shake your hand, and he would know your name. And he would write letters to like everyone in the room saying, thank you for coming out to support Mr. Roosevelt today. And he became the Postmaster General. And so there's a quantum leap in the quality of stamps with Roosevelt being elected in 1932. So you have kind of like the before 1932 stamps and the after 1932 stamps. So the most interesting stamps, you know, the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, those stamps are really, I love all those stamps from that period. Yes?
He also checked every single stamp that was produced during his term.
Oh yeah, to approve them or whatever.
He made sure he double-proofed
Yeah.
every single stamp.
Yeah, I think he even designed a couple of them.
Yeah.
Which is really, that's an intriguing thing. So Roosevelt, he's our local stamp president. I love this quote. Franklin Roosevelt was a lifelong stamp collector. I owe my life to my hobbies, especially stamp collecting. He began collecting stamps when he was bedridden from polio, right? So yeah, very important thing. It's a way of being aware of the world around you. Right? Maybe you can't leave Hyde Park, but you can travel, you know, in a virtual way by looking at postage stamps. I like this one. This is a stamp collector for president, right? So they try to get that important stamp collecting vote. And there's a lot of people out there, thousands, millions of them, right? And so what I did, I have you press this little button here and yeah, perfect. Probably not a good idea. So the president overstamp. And here it is, the Philippines, you know, they're commemorating the stamp collecting president. Here he is at his desk working in Hyde Park. That's pretty neat. I mean, I'd give anything to see that stamp collection. Too bad there isn't somebody that can like try to reconstruct it or something. I mean, that would be, yes.
Did they sell it to a museum?
No.
Or just a private person?
No, they sold it to
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. What?
No, they just sold it off at auction. Like, you know, it'd be equivalent to putting it on eBay or something.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yes, maybe
You
you,
know Anthony Musso? Is he somebody you know?
no?
Anthony Musso worked for the post office, and what he did was outreach. He's lectures on a lot of these different topics.
Yeah.
He's written several books about post offices and many different things.
Yep.
And he was able to acquire some of the stamps from Roosevelt's collection.
So are they at a university or something now, or?
He has, you know, as part of a private collection.
Yeah.
He's a good guy, Anthony Musso, and he has lectured for us here also.
Well, tell him that he should like give it to the FDR library so people can get to it.
Yes.
Anyway, so here he is collecting. Again, more collecting here. Another one. So they really, you know, they really got this out there. Monaco even issued a lot of other countries issue stamps honoring Americans, and so you could do you could have an American stamp only collection and then have a collection of Americans honored by other countries' stamp collection. Again, stamp collecting, it builds better citizens. That's why I'm such a quality citizen, because I was a stamp collector as a young person. Yeah, here it is. This is grandpa collecting stamps, you know, so it's kind of a neat thing. I think back at my own life, you know, I kind of smile when I think of working on my stamp collection. It's kind of a fun thing. We saw this one already. Here he is again. All right, this is one of my all-time favorite FDR stamps. Isn't that great? And there's an Eleanor stamp that goes with this, but this really like captures him, you know, the optimism of FDR, you know. It's just what the country needed in 1932. Someone who said, yeah, we can get out of this thing, nothing to fear but fear itself. So I really like that stamp. And this is Wendell Willkie. Now, it's a Wendell Willkie stamp. He ran for president in 1940 against FDR. What an interesting character. If you read the book, The Forgotten Man by Amity Shlaes, I taught a course on the Great Depression a couple years ago here. Read that book. There's a whole section in there about Wendell Willkie. And what's odd about him, he was a Democrat. He was approached by the Republicans to run for president, and he was a millionaire, you know, like a businessman. And the idea that if we only get a businessman as president, all the problems will be solved. It's kind of an American, long-term American illusion. And he's kind of like President Trump, believe it or not. Wendell Willkie was deeply despised by the Republican establishment because they all thought it was their turn to be president. And instead, Willkie, the dark horse, comes in, he gets the nomination, and he did fairly well. You know, it would have been interesting to see what would happen if he would have got elected in 1940. It would have been an interesting thing. Here he is. What a great, that's kind of the iconic Wendell Willkie picture. And of course, they honor him. He died in 1944, which is fascinating too. If he would have been elected in 40, he would have died in office. And he was a big drinker and smoker. And they said that his hair was always messed up and his suit was always a little rumpled, you know. Yeah, go ahead.
What is the nuts and bolts of collecting stamps? For instance, when you were a kid and you wanted to get a collection together,
Yeah.
how did you get older stamps?
Well, my parents had a lot to do with it, you know. Like they would, I started collecting stamps that were canceled, you know, so they would like save the mail when it would come in, and then you steam the stamp, you know, to get it off the sticker, and then you paste them down. And there's stamp albums that you buy. You know, you buy them at a hobby shop for like $1.95 or something, and you paste them down. It's a good way to keep ADD children like myself busy. Pass the stamps down, you know. Yeah, go ahead.
You could get starter kits too.
Oh yeah.
You know, mail order, and they come in, that's how I do it.
Yeah, I get stamps every month from Mystic Stamp Company in Jamestown, New York. You just subscribe to it, they send you like some every month. It's kind of a fun thing. Yes.
You don't glue your stamps
No.
directly, you gotta put the hinges
Of
on.
course, when I was a kid, I did. I would glue them and staple them so my sister wouldn't get them. No, so they have, you can put a hinge on it, and what's that? It's like little tiny, you have to like lift the thing and stick it on there, you know, or now they have like a little plastic envelope. I'll bring in one of my stamp albums and show you next week. They're mint stamps now, you know, because I have a lot of money now. So I buy the mint stamps, you know, so they're like, not stamped, not, you know, canceled. So you put them in plastic, they're protected. That way, when I kick the bucket, my daughters will sell the collection and keep the money. All right, so this is a great Wendell Willkie picture. Right? Learn to say President Willkie. That's kind of hard to say. And here it is. This was his big thing. No third term, right? And think, who nominated Hitler? Hitler. Who nominated Mussolini? Who nominated Roosevelt? Who nominated? Well, the people nominated Willkie, right? So that was 1940 campaign. Here's kind of an interesting question. Who are the top three what three Americans have the most postage stamps in their honor? Well, here it is in order. President Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson. So these are the top three most popular stamps. I should be able to name. There's probably a couple hundred Washington stamps. So here he is. This is what he looked like, President Washington. And this is I remember this stamp when I was a kid. You know, it's like the famous series, right? Like, isn't that weird? It's like this image like burned in your head, right? So this is what Washington looks like, right? That stamp. This is in Mount Vernon. You've been there lately? They did a big improvement. They did another like underground museum, like they did the World War I museum. And these are wax figures, and these are reconstructed by forensic people to reconstruct, you know, Washington's face, the way he actually looked. And of course, he had smallpox, so we would have had, you know, they cleaned that up. But I mean, this is what he looked like as a young man and then as an older man. Yeah, look at that, great. I mean, you know, we're so used to having like the Washington image on the dollar bill or the postage stamp, you know, the 1 cent stamp, that when you see him, you know, this is sort of like in the flesh, you know, it's like hard to believe he was a real person. And he was such an icon. And this is my favorite Thomas Jefferson painting. Here he is, he's doing the French thing, right? The French, and like he liked living in France. He got a lot of wine, a lot of books, a lot of people that, you know, he really enjoyed France. He could speak French. His library is the core of the Library of Congress library, and they have his books on display. There's about maybe 5,000 books, and if you look at the books that Jefferson read, it's fascinating. He spoke German, French, Spanish, Latin, a little bit of Hebrew, ancient Greek. He was a polymath. You know, he did a little bit of everything. What's that?
English.
Well, he did English too, but he was from Virginia, so that doesn't count. So Jefferson is an amazing man, and he didn't want to be remembered as being president. He didn't like being president, and he was a shy man. He had a high squeaky voice. He was a tall, high squeaky voice, and he didn't like public speaking, which is very strange. Abraham Lincoln was a great public speaker. Thomas Jefferson was a shy. He was more of a writer. In fact, he wrote the Declaration of Independence, right? Well, he's more of a writer than he is a public speaker. So he would like to write things out. He's like a thinker. He writes things out rather than do public speaking. Right, here it is. That's a good Jefferson stamp. Again, this 2 cent stamp that was a series, I think, from the 1950s, and these are iconic American stamps. I love this quote, Thomas Jefferson. I have sworn hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man. Not bad, right? That's a pretty good thing. And again, think about young people today. They're image-driven. So you can give them an interesting lecture about the virtues of Thomas Jefferson, or you can say, see this image here? Yeah, kind of an important idea. It kind of wraps up Jefferson's whole philosophy. Now, this is another great American, Benjamin Franklin. I love this painting of Benjamin Franklin. He is another, like, the first American, right? H.W. Brands, the historian from New York City, Texas, he wrote a biography of Benjamin called The First American. Benjamin Franklin, again, like a universal man, you know. And then he was also the first postmaster general. Now, why did he do that? Because he likes money. Right? The post office wasn't organized when he was, you know, it was like before the Revolution. And control of information, you know, it'd be like Google or Facebook or something today. So he controlled the post offices and the, what's Highway 9 here? What's that called again? The Albany Post Road. Well, he helped to build this network of roads so that the post offices were linked. So the colonies were woven together, kind of like the primitive internet, right? And he controlled it because he published his own newspaper. So he got access to information and then published it and sent it out. You know, very, very, I mean, genius guy. Today he'd be like an internet, entrepreneur, social media guy. And I love this one too, right? And this is, of course, the story of Benjamin Franklin, you know, and the flying the kite, you know. When I was a kid, I always wanted to try that. Fly up there. I'd have my sister hold this rope for me. Oh, it didn't work. Well, so I mean, that's a great Benjamin Franklin thing. You know, like it's kind of like Prometheus. You know, giving fire to people. You know, electricity. And again, this is a great stamp too. Signer of the Declaration of Independence, U.S. Minister to France, Benjamin Franklin. He was never president, but he was really, you know, when you think of the quintessential American, Benjamin Franklin is the guy. He invented bifocals, the Franklin stove. Why do you know what the Franklin stove is? Right? A regular fireplace, something like 90% of the wood goes up the chimney and doesn't really heat the house. And they cut down all the trees in the greater Philadelphia area. So to get firewood for the city, you had to like truck it in from the hinterlands. So he figured out a way to make the fireplace more efficient by having the stove away from the wall so the heat radiates out. The guy invented the Franklin stove. I mean, that's amazing, right? What a genius. And he didn't take a patent or anything on that. So like he just sort of like did it, you know. Again, these are some of the, I love this series of stamps. This is an annoying thing for a stamp collector, right? I'm venting all my grievances today. I feel better about this now, you know, like rounded up to the nearest penny, you know, 50 cents of it. Right, here's my other one. People are tired. Americans are tired these days. So you used to have to take the stamp and lick it and stick it on the envelope. Oh no, that's asking too much. So today they have the pre-sticky kind. You peel it off. My granddaughter, Addie, she loves stickers. So, like, where are they? They're on the refrigerator, they're all over the house, or the back of the chairs, the cat has them on them, all over the back. Well, yeah, so it's like kindergarten children with stickers. That's the modern stamps. Well, if you're a stamp collector, well, that's really a pain in the neck. Because you can't, like, how are you supposed to mount that in your book? You peel it off and stick it on the page? You can't do that. So this started maybe like 10 years ago. There's another reason why I like the stamps from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, right? But, so here's a stamp. These are the pre-sticky kind, and these are 2006. They put the date on them now. And this is kind of the life and career of Benjamin Franklin. Now, why is this a good thing? Again, if you're talking to a bunch of dopey 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds, right? You can say, here, these are the pretty pictures, okay? So first, Benjamin Franklin. He drew this famous cartoon, Join or Die, the idea that we were 13 colonies, and he's one of the people that first propagated the idea of let's unite. United States of America, if we unite, we can join and we can become independent of Great Britain, right? So join or die, it's kind of an interesting thing. And then he's signed the Declaration of Independence, right? Here he is as a scientist. We forget. What else did Benjamin Franklin do? He spent a lot of time in England and in France. How do you get there? On a boat. He's on the boat. He's bored. What do you do on the boat? You play shuffleboard. You hang around the bars. Nothing to do. So he figures out the Gulf Stream. He would like take things and throw it overboard and watch it float. So he figured out the Gulf Stream. Among other, the guy did everything. Amazing. He'd be like, of all the founding fathers, he'd be the one you'd want to like spend a couple of days with, just sitting there picking his brain. Well, Thomas Jefferson was pretty good too, but I mean, Benjamin Franklin, very interesting character. So here he is, scientist. He was a member of the Royal Society in England. They made him a member of that, which is quite an accomplishment for an American. He's a printer. Okay, again, he did the Postmaster General thing because he was a printer, right? So again, today we would make money on the internet. Back in those days, printers were the people that controlled the flow of information. So he was a master printer. That's how he made his fortune. Poor Richard's Almanac. And then here he is. He retires at age 43. He becomes like a philosopher, a world traveler. Interesting man. So that's kind of the career of Benjamin Franklin in 4 stamps. Not bad. Yes, go ahead.
What's that 28? Would that be
I don't know. It looks like it. Anybody know what that is? Yeah, it's probably something to do with, this looks like a postal wire or something. It's probably something to do with this postal.
Some kind of
Yeah, postmaster, see?
Some type of a franking thing.
Yeah,
When you frank a stamp,
yeah, that's the
some type
stamp.
of a franking model.
And again, this honors him as a postmaster. So again, there's a lot of stamps issued. They like Benjamin. The post office likes Benjamin Franklin because he's the first postmaster. Yes.
So why is it E. Free Franklin on the last one?
I don't know. That's another strange one. Be free. I'll have to do some.
So it can fit. The postmaster's a wrong word.
Yeah, but why does it say free though?
Maybe that's his middle name.
Maybe it's his middle name.
You have somebody Google this.
I'm doing this right now.
We'll do some research, quick.
I'm working on it.
See, this is why. See, it makes it difficult if you're a teacher. You can't lie anymore because everybody has like Googles and they're like searching and verifying, fact checking. Yeah, you get a lot of pressure on me here, but I can do it. I'm a professional. Yeah.
If you go to the Roosevelt Library, to the Wallace Center.
Yes.
They have a franking thing that you can buy a postcard and you can get it franked.
Oh, really?
A franking is like that is canceled.
Yes.
A franking thing, and you can get your postcard franked. And then you can drop it into the.
Let's go now, road trip to the FDR estate. I'm always up for that.
Yeah, the Wallace Center, where you check in.
And we'll talk about Henry Wallace too later on. Because this is the career of Benjamin Franklin. All right, now, here's the good question. Yes?
No middle name.
No middle name. Well, what's a free there for?
It's like a free library.
I don't know.
Maybe he's postmaster, he gets free postage.
It's the name of the post office.
What is that?
It's Benjamin, right?
In Philadelphia.
Is that true?
That's what it says here, be free Franklin Post Office.
See, this is a great thing. Yeah, I was going to say that.
It is a museum too.
Well, that's another reason to go to Philadelphia besides the cheesesteaks, right? All right, so here's the interesting question. How are U.S. postage stamps selected? You ever wonder that? Right? Well, there's a committee for that. We're Americans. We always have committees. Sort of like the Bard Lifeline. There's always a committee, right? So it's called the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee. What an interesting thing. Who knew that, right? So who are these people? Well, this is something the post office sent. Thank you for your recent correspondence. I suppose they mailed this to you. Each year, the Post Office receives thousands of suggestions for new postage stamps, right? As the number of stamps are limited, right? The Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee was established in 1957 to review all suggestions and to make recommendations to the Postmaster General. So there's a committee that studies that. The committee members are based on recommendation, national interest, historical perspective. I'll go through the list of what requirements are. There's no specific time frame for the issuance of stamps and blah blah blah. So in other words, they would. So if you wrote to the Postmaster General and said, hey, we really need a stamp to honor John Anthony Quitman from Rhinebeck, right? They would write back to you, send this back to you, okay? So here's the committee, right? Looks like a cross-section of average Americans or something. So this is the committee that studies these things. And here they are presenting the repeal of the Stamp Act stamp. They always, whenever they unveil a stamp, they always have like a big party, a big festival, Yes?
Is this a government position? They are employees of the government?
I imagine they're appointed, it's kind of like,
It's a cabinet position.
well, the Postmaster General, but this committee, I think, was probably appointed. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure it's political. Everyththing's political, right? Yes.
I'm just going back to the Be Free Franklin. It says in the New York Times article that that's how he signed his name on envelopes as the first Postmaster General of the United States.
He signed his name, Be Free Franklin?
Apparently, the New York Times said so.
Well, that's interesting. See, this is the greatest thing ever. All right. Okay, so usually when they unveil a stamp, they go to the location and they make a big deal about, the stamp. They have again, they want to sell stamps, right? So they make a big deal about it. All right, these are some of the general rules. There are, I think, 10 or 12 rules. I'll go through these very quickly. They're kind of interesting. The general policy is that U.S. postage stamp primarily will feature American or American-related subjects. So, in other words, if you're interested in American studies, American history, stamps are a good way to kind of get a handle on American culture, right? That's kind of what they're. So, American topics. I like this stamp, rural America. I was there a couple days ago, Kansas. Makes me homesick just looking at the picture, right? Now, no living person shall be honored or portrayed in a U.S. stamp. So we don't have the Obama Elvis stamp or the President Trump stamp. So you can't be a living person. So the first qualification to be on a stamp, you have to be dead, right? Now, is that a good idea? Yeah, that's a really good idea. Why is that? Well, because of this, right? I'll do a whole thing in a couple of weeks about Nazi stamps. Hitler received a commission for every stamp that was sold. He got like a kickback because his picture was on the stamp. It is amazing, right? Not that our politicians would ever do anything like that. Yeah. And here's a Francisco Franco stamp from Spain. He was the dominant character, for from the Spanish Civil War on until he died in 1975. And of course, the Castro stamp, the Saddam Hussein stamp. right? The Chairman Mao stamp, and of course the Stalin stamp. So we don't have stamps honoring the current batch of politicians, which is probably a good idea, right? Life is annoying enough, right? The 10-year rule. This is kind of an interesting one too. Commemorative stamps honoring individuals usually will be issued in conjunction with the anniversary of their birth, but no postage sooner than 10 years after the individual. Now that you have to be dead, you have to be dead for 10 years. Is that a good idea? That's a really good idea, right? Because sometimes people get emotional. Oh, you know, I don't know, who's some, No, think of some like rock star, somebody that died lately of a drug overdose or something. We're so emotional, we have to have a stamp on that person. Well, you wait 10 years, and if they're still relevant, then you might do a stamp. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So you have to be dead, you have to be dead for 10 years. Right?
Except
Here.
if you're a president.
Now,
Go back.
Yeah, what's that?
Go back.
Oh no, the president one is different. We'll get to that. There's always exceptions to every committee, you know this, right? So, see this stamp here? This is the best-selling stamp in U.S. postal history. And number 2 is Marilyn Monroe stamp, right? And I think it's fascinating. So they issued this stamp 10 years after he died. Yes. They always, you have it.
So I have Wendell Lakey, and Oklahoma.
The Oklahoma stamp. This is fantastic. All right. So the Elvis stamp, right? And of course, here's the president's stamp. So presidents are exempt from the 10-year dead rule. So when President Gerald Ford died, they did a Gerald Ford stamp. The multiples of 50 rule. Events of historical significance shall be considered to commemorate only anniversary of multiples of 50 years. So it's got to be 50, 100, 150, 200, 250 anniversary. You can't have like every year, the 47th anniversary. It doesn't work, okay? So here, this is the stamp, the World War I stamp, and I put saving England's bacon. That would have been a good thing to put on a stamp. Or making the world safe for British and French imperialism. That's snarky, right? So this is the World War I stamp, and again, this commemorates the 100th anniversary of America's involvement in World War I. So it's the 100th anniversary stamp. Only events, persons, themes, wide national appeal, right? So in other words, it isn't something, again, we like John Anthony Quitman from Rhinebeck, but it's sort of, we're interested here and maybe in Mississippi, but it doesn't have, he's not like a national appeal character. Stamps are not to be issued in honor of fraternal, political, or sectarian service or charitable organizations, okay? So this is, I'm a Freemason, so there aren't any American Masonic stamps. So this is the Grand Lodge of India issued by India. So we don't have American stamps honoring the Knights of Columbus or anything like that. So no fraternal organizations, no Moose Lodge stamp. Stamps shall not be issued in honor of cities, towns, municipalities, countries, primary, second schools, libraries, similar institutions. Why is that? Again, they want to have states are about as local as you can get. So they have like the state of Oklahoma stamp, the Kansas stamp when they entered the Union, but they don't have like honoring the founding of Red Hook, New York. There's no stamp like that, right? There really should be, don't you think? Stottsburg, the center of New York, right? There's no such thing. Requests for observance of statehood anniversaries will be considered, again, in 50-year intervals from when the state enters the Union. Okay, so 50-year intervals. So Oklahoma became a state in 1907, so 2007 was the 100th anniversary stamp for Oklahoma. And here, this is Texas statehood. Right? Again, that's issuing the 100th anniversary. Stamps shall be issued honoring religious institutions or individuals whose principal achievement associated with religious. So in other words, you don't have, like, I checked this. There's no Billy Graham stamp or the Reverend Jerry Falwell stamp. And there won't be a Reverend Dr. Mark E. Isaac stamp unless I do something useful. Right? There's nothing in the area of religion, right? Now this one, Alan Flanagan of Boys Town, he has a stamp. Well, why is that? Because he's not remembered as, he went to Mount St. Mary College in Emmitsburg, Maryland, and no. He's remembered because of Boys Town.
Is that a charitable organization?
Yeah, well, it is. But somehow they got it in there.
Movie.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes?
I remember that the post office would put out limited editions, like two sheets that you put these for a wedding or something like that. And they put
Yeah.
this on their own stamp.
They started that maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, and again, they're trying to raise money. So you know, they kind of like waive all of the rules, and now you can like print your own stamps and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they still do that.
Yeah. Why, you plan on getting married? You want to have it? Yes.
Could you print your own stamp and put it on an envelope? Would it go through the postal service, or do they check and?
No, they have like a computer program, and you can like put the picture, you know, of yourself or something on there and print it up now. You know, but it isn't like issued by the post office. It's
Does it go through the post office?
yeah.
They see.
Now, all of a sudden, I'll be getting a lot of mail with people's pictures on it. So again, they have these committee, you know, it's funny, they have these committee rules, but when it comes time, we have to make money, all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we'll waive the rule here.
How long has that committee been in existence?
They said since 1957.
Okay, so Wendell Wilkie was before that, so,
Oh yeah, he died in 1944, but that was a series of like famous American stamps,
Yeah,
I think, from the
but it
80s or something.
it wasn't, oh, okay.
Yeah.
The stamp was issued before or after? the
Yes.
committee.
Yeah. Yeah, like notable American series or something. We'll show you that. So, all right, Father Flanagan of Boys Town, he made it another stamp here. Now, these are interesting, okay? Stamps shall not be issued to honor religious institutions and so on. Well, every year, they have these Christmas stamps, right?
Correct.
And you know, I'm a militant believer in the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right? And I get really nervous when the government starts picking out religions to honor. Like, just stay out of it, right? But they have a Christmas stamp, and Madonna and Child is a famous thing, so instead of making it, you know, like a Roman Catholic thing, you know, they try to tie it into like classical art pictures, right? And of course, the Magi. How many kings were there? It's a trick question.
Nobody knows, and you didn't have a camera.
Yeah, well, not only that, everyone thinks, we three kings of Orient are raising the price of gas for your car. So they think there are three kings because they saw the claymation special, right? Well, there weren't three and they weren't kings.
That's right.
They had gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. My opinion, they were Lutherans. They went in on the gifts. Could have been 50, 60, 70 of them together. They could have been 70 of them. And there were magi, like scientists from Persia, and they came, you know.
They were sightseers.
But you know, you can't tell people this. It's like, I used to be Christian, but the minister told me there weren't three kings, and now I don't believe that stuff anymore. So anyway, so they have the three kings. They have to keep reinforcing the image of the three kings, right?
Yeah.
All right. And of course, these are the famous Santa Claus stamps, right? And that's based on, this series is based on Coca-Cola series. So this is the Coca-Cola Santa Claus. Do you know about Santa Claus? Do you know who Thomas Nast is?
Yes.
He's a great cartoonist from New York City in the 1870s. He drew things like Boss Tweed, and he invented the Tammany tiger image, the GOP elephant, and the Democrat donkey. I mean, that's him. He invented the modern day Santa Claus. So when you think of Santa Claus, he has a white coat with the trim and the belt and the beard and, you know, jolly old Saint Nick. That's Thomas Nast.
Right.
He basically like invented Santa Claus. Very interesting thing. And when he got a lot of money, he moved to New Jersey. Again, these are like Christmas stamps, right? So we have, you know, and some of them, and these are mostly like non-religious kind of things, you know, the toys and that kind of thing. Norman Rockwell moment. Right, here's another, la 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 la, all is come bright, one horse open sleigh, jolly old Saint Nick. Nothing to do with religion, but we all like Christmas stuff, right? And of course, for our Jewish friends, we have to have a Hanukkah stamp, right? So every year they have a Hanukkah stamp. The question is, do you spell it with the CH or the H? Right? It's always like a big, you want to like get in a fight, you walk up to a bunch of Jewish people and go, do you spell it with the CH or the H? All of a sudden fist fights break out, you know? So Hanukkah. When I was a kid, I lived in Maryland, and about half the kids in my school were Jewish. I always wanted to be Jewish because Hanukkah, they got like presents like 7 days in a row. Finally got gifts one night. You know, there was Christmas Eve. You know, so
8 days.
so there's the Hanukkah stamp. 8 days. That's even better. Right? I like this joke here. Stamps at Hanukkah. There aren't many good stamp jokes, and this is one, right? A droll tale. Mary goes in to buy a post office. She must have been Catholic, I don't know. She goes to buy to buy stamps for Hanukkah cards, and she says to the cashier, "May I have 50 Hanukkah stamps?" And the cashier says, "What denomination?" She said, "What day? Has it come to this? Give me 6 Orthodox, 12 Conservative, and 4." That's pretty good, you gotta admit. There aren't many good stamp jokes. That's one, right there. That's a good stamp joke. And of course, we have to have the Kwanzaa stamp.
Yeah, that's no.
Go ahead. I dare you. Ask me about Kwanzaa.
What about Kwanzaa?
You don't want to know. It's like a phony holiday. They just like made it up. There's like no, you know.
Like all the others.
No, this one is really phony. Really phony. Right? And of course, this is for our Islamic friends, we have to have an Eid stamp, right? Go ahead, ask me about the Eid stamp.
What about the Eid stamp?
You don't want to know. All right? Does anybody know what Eid is? No. Why? Because we're dopey Americans. We think all religions are equally invalid. Don't bother looking at it. Okay, ready? Yeah, go ahead. What's
When you
Eid?
go to the post office, you have a choice of which one.
That's true. No, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
The only one with significance.
When my father-in-law said to me before he died, he says, "Go to the post office and get some stamps." So I bought him Kwanzaa stamps. Yeah.
Stamp is a stamp.
Didn't go.
Eid is in Arabic or Muslim holiday.
Yes. And would you know about it? Okay, ready? Who is Jewish? If you're Jewish, you read the Torah, right? So Genesis 22, 1 through 22 is the story of Abraham almost sacrifices his son, who? Isaac. Okay? All right? In the Christian tradition, Matthew chapter 1, 1 through 17, the genealogy of Jesus, Jesus is related to who? Abraham and Isaac and down and so on and so on and so on and so on. So he's in that line, right? Okay. Eid commemorates the almost sacrifice of Abraham's son, which is who? Ishmael. All right. If Ishmael is the chosen one, then the Jewish and Christian religions are not true. That's a problem, right? So here we are putting the stamps on there thinking, oh, good, let's commemorate this. You know, they're very odd things. So people don't know, you know, again, study religions. You know, we live in New York, we ought to know about all these religions, right? So that's an Eid stamp. All right, 10. Stationary, all right, these are called semi-postal stamps. These are really interesting. Public Law 106, all right. Semi-postal, what are these? These are stamps that you pay a little extra and they're used for fundraising. So the 9/11 stamp was actually used for fundraising, and the most famous one is the breast cancer stamp. This is one, you know, save ancient species. There's an Alzheimer's stamp, stop family violence, right? The breast cancer stamp, the semi-postal stamp, through July 2018, it raised 1.03, oh sorry, they sold 1.3 billion stamps. They raised $87.8 million for breast cancer research, buying those stamps. That's kind of neat, right? That's called a semi-postal stamp. So those are kind of a good thing to...
87 million in addition or separate from what the postage itself was?
No, yeah, because you pay extra. You like the
It's
semi-postal.
the extra that made it.
I don't know how much it is. Like, if
Yeah.
the stamp is 50 cents, it's like 60 cents or something. And that adds up. You know, so semi-postals are a good thing to use. You know, we need to be charitable, right? Yeah, that's the breast cancer stamps. Requests for commemoration, university, other institutions shall be considered only for stamp cards. So the 200th anniversary, so you have to have a 200-year-old college. Now, why do they do that? This rule makes a lot of sense. I've been to Oklahoma now, so that's what University of Oklahoma is. I went to the football game, 90,000 people. It's a cult. Oh, you. They all wear red shirts, you know. They would have, like, every stamp would be an OU stamp if they had it their way, right? So universities has to be 200th anniversary. Here's a stamp, Columbia University, right? 200th anniversary, 1954. So the university stamps are kind of rare. We have to wait a long time for the Bard College Lifelong Learning Institute stamp. No stamp shall be issued treating of the same subject issued in the past 50 years. So in other words, you can't have the same event commemorated over and over and over again. So this is why collecting stamps are kind of interesting. You get sort of a historical perspective. You can do like a linear timeline that way. And again, American flag stamps, you know, these are always classic. I like this stamp. It's a 4-cent stamp, and this is before Alaska and Hawaii became states, so 48-star flag. That's the flag of World War II. Here, these are a couple of books you can look at. This book here is A History of America in 36 Postage Stamps. So this is sort of what we're going to be doing here, except a lot more than 36 stamps, right? And then here's another one, 100 Greatest American Stamps. You can look at these books if you want, kind of fun. And now I'm going to go into the next lecture very quickly. So smoke if you got them, I'll be right back. So you get an idea how stamps are selected, right? That's the point here. All right, now, this section is really long. It'll probably take a couple of weeks to go through. This is American history in stamps, right? And coming down the line, we're going to have a new series on American presidents, America at war stamps, American art, writers and inventions. So we have different lectures coming up ahead. So this one is just general American history stamps. Again, here we have Grandpa collecting stamps with his grandson. And again, this is the American Postal Museum. Let me stop here for a second. The Smithsonian Institute has all kinds of museums there now. One of them is the Museum of the Bible that lines going around the block. I mean, I want to get down and see that. It's really a brand new museum. Well, one of the museums is called the American Postal Museum. And Mrs. Isaacs and I went there, I don't know, 10 years ago now. And so if you're interested in stamps, go right there and check it out. So this is a stamp commemorating the American Postal Museum, which is part of the Smithsonian Institute. Again, this is kind of an array of interesting American flag stamps. Again, these are all American themes, right? So that's one of the requirements for American postage stamps. This is Columbia, and again, this is an American theme, right? All right, here we go. History of America. This is the Leif Erikson stamp. We can feel good about this, right? So this is always like a sore subject on Columbus Day. Always mentioned to people, hey, Columbus arrived late. Leif Erikson. Now, why do we honor Columbus instead of Leif Erikson? Here's the answer. Leif Erikson, when he got into trouble back in Norway and Sweden among the tribes, he went to Iceland, he got in trouble there, so he went to Greenland, got in trouble there, so he went to Newfoundland. One of my goals in life is to go to Newfoundland because they have Viking ruins up there. They actually made it. The difference is he left, he went back again, right? So Leif Erikson didn't follow through and bring all of his relatives. That comes later on, right? When the Swedish and Norwegian people come in the 19th century. So they didn't follow through. Columbus, when he arrived in 1492, he was the first of many, and then it was like opening the floodgates. So Columbus followed through, Leif Erikson didn't. So that's why we honor Columbus. Now we'll talk about Columbus in about 2 seconds here, so hold on. Don't leave. All right? This is Christopher Columbus. Is this what he looked like? We don't know what Christopher Columbus looked like, right? Which is a very strange thing. Remember, I did a class on Washington Irving, seems like about 10 years ago now. Anyone who was in that class, Washington, you probably forgot it already, right? Well, remember, Washington Irving, right, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, they wrote a 5-volume set on the life of Christopher Columbus. Now, why is that interesting? Columbus was kind of forgotten in the 1830s and 40s, like we kind of forgot about Columbus. Washington Irving spent 17 years living in Spain. He becomes a Spanish ambassador at one point. He learned Spanish, and he got into the Spanish archives, and he did primary source research on the life of Christopher Columbus, and then he wrote this 5-volume set. And it's really a good set of books. I've read like massive parts of it, but the one bad thing about it, the idea that did Christopher Columbus believe that the world was round and everyone believed the world was flat? That comes from Washington Irving. It's like a literary invention. invention. So people knew that the world was round in Columbus's day. They thought that the globe was smaller than it was, right? So they miscalculated. So to the day he died, Christopher Columbus thought he found the outer islands of China, right? So that's why people are they're called Indians, because he thought he discovered the Indies, okay? So this is not, we don't know what he looked like, but this is kind of like a recreation of what we think he looked like. This is the World Columbian Exposition. This is when Columbus really hit the big time, okay? It's 1892. Stop. Why is 1892 interesting? This is a World's Fair that's held in Chicago. I'll show you pictures of it in a second. What was going on in 1892, 1893? Are you familiar with the Great Depression? 1929 to 1941. When I teach economics, my kids have no idea. They've never heard of the Great Depression before. So you have to know about the Great Depression. 1892, 1893 was a depression. How bad was it? They didn't keep records like we do now. One of the things that the New Deal administration did, they started collecting economic statistics and data, Bureau of Labor Statistics and that sort of thing. So back in they didn't collect the data. The unemployment rate peaked at 25% during the Great Depression and fell down to between 17 and 25%, male head of household. In the 1892, 1893 depression, it was probably worse, but it didn't go on for 11 years. Many of the people that are the radicals of 1900, 1910, people in the left wing in American politics, they got radicalized because as young men, they suffered through this 1892 depression, right? So in the middle of this Great Depression, they hold this Columbian Exposition in Chicago, and it was huge, right? This is the one of the advertising brochures for it, and this was a undeveloped swamp on the shore of Lake Michigan, and they filled in the swamp and they built all these elaborate buildings and they wired it for electricity. So is that an amazing thing? Yeah, most people live in farms, like off the grid, right? They pump the water by hand. They burn kerosene lamps. There's no electricity. So to go to a place like this and see, the city of the future with electricity, this really it enlightened people in many ways. And this is what it looked like. These are all like cheap buildings, like plaster, and they kind of like put these up and they tore them down. Kind of like with the '64 World's Fair in Flushing Meadows in Queens. They built it all, it's there for a year or two, and they tear it down. So look at this place. I wish they, build it permanently. What a great thing. Looks like Venice or something. Venice on steroids. Here it is. And this thing, it attracted like millions of people went to this thing. It was huge. And at night they lit it up, right? If you ever been to, I haven't been there, but Disneyland or Disney World, they do the same thing. The parade of lights, they light it all up. It's impressive now, but imagine back then. I mean, it must have been just mind-blowing. And who's this? Buffalo Bill, okay? This is a part of the famous American series, and they issued a stamp about Buffalo Bill. The people that ran the Columbian Exposition thought that Buffalo Bill's Wild West show was crass and low-rent. I like people like this, crass and low-rent. This is why I like Golden Corral. I'm excited it's coming back to the coast. These are my people, right? I like Golden Corral, right? So they wouldn't let him in the Columbian Exposition, so he set up his Wild West show next to it. So people would come down from Iowa or Wisconsin or something, and they would go to the fair, and then they would take in the Wild West show. He actually drew almost as many people at his Wild West show that they did at the Columbian Exposition. Fantastic, right? What a showman, right? Now, these are postage stamps that were issued. Go ahead. 5 minutes? Okay. These are postage stamps that were issued to help hype and promote this Columbian Exposition in 1892, 1893. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to honor Columbus. Why? It's 1492 since Columbus discovered America. Right? I'm using he discovered America, right? So the Columbian Exposition is to honor Columbus. Now Columbus becomes big time because of 1892, right? So we learn about Columbus at school, Columbus Day, and all that kind of stuff. So here he is, and there's a whole series of these stamps. This is the 1 cent, the 2 cent stamp, You know, of course, here he is landing at the beach, you know, claiming the new world, the landing of Columbus. The Pinta Maria and the Santa Maria, Nina Pinta Santa Maria ships. At the Columbian Expedition, they had full-size replicas of the ships. And if you've ever seen these, you've ever been to Plymouth to see the Mayflower, right? You're like, holy smokes, would you get on that ship? I don't think so. So they were like kind of like big fishing boats you wouldn't want to take on the Hudson River, much less go across the Atlantic. But yeah, I'll say. Here they are, right? The fleet of Columbus. And Columbus announcing his discovery. So he comes back to Ferdinand and Isabel. Here, I might as well talk about this for a second. What year did Columbus discover America? 1492. What else happened in 1492? Three things. Right? Well, three things, okay? Well, back up. What happened before that? The Moors were kicked out of Spain. Okay, so that's the first event. And what's that all about? In Spanish history, okay, Ernest Hemingway, you like to go to the cathedrals, you like the bloody crucifixes and the bullfights and all that stuff. Spanish history is like bloody, okay? Why? They spent 785 years fighting the Islamic Moors who were superior to them. So that's why the Spanish, you know, the horsemen and the knights, you know, they're really tough because they were fighting the Moors for 700. Finally, they drove the Moors out of Spain. What did that do? Well, that enabled them to look around and go, we're Catholic. Okay. Islamic people, they're the other people. Wait a minute. Jews. Jews are not Catholics. They're sort of like Islamic people because Islamic people and Jews and Catholics got along famously in the academic world in Toledo. They studied together. So Jews were immediately suspicious. So get rid of the Jews. So the Jews are expelled from Spain, first into the Islamic, then the Jews. Then you have all these unemployed people. What did they used to do? Well, they used to beat up on the Islamic people, right? That's what they did for 700 years. It's like a family tradition. So what do they're unemployed. So what do? They show up at the dock. Columbus takes them to the New World. When they land on the beach, what do they run into?
Indians.
And they have black hair and dark skin, sort of like the Islamic people. God help us defeat the Islamic people, and now He gave us the new gift of Indians to torment and torture. Like basically the Native Americans didn't stand a chance. You know, when you think about that, it's like, it's creepy, isn't it? Right? All right, so really they come back from the New World, and now, what are some interesting things? You're familiar with the Columbian Exchange? Think of Thanksgiving dinner. What do you have? Turkey, corn, right? You have pumpkin pie, right? It's all like New World stuff. Potatoes, right? So that stuff came back to America. What did we give them? Well, we gave them things like smallpox, you know, Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. Read that book sometime. But what did the Native Americans give us in return? You know, people think, yeah, we're horrible. We gave them all European diseases. Well, no, they gave us a gift too. Tobacco, right? And syphilis. So it's kind of a figure, it balances out, you know? Like, here, you get syphilis and tobacco, we'll give you smallpox, right? Fascinating. So the Columbian Exchange. So Columbus, whether you like him or don't, you don't have to like him or not like him, right? But you have to know about him. Very important person in world history. So I'm not one of these people like tear down the statue of Columbus and annihilate the day and call it Indigenous People Day or something. No, he's important. He's an important person to know in the flow of Western world civilization. Yes?
He's sometimes thought of as a Jewish person
Oh, yeah.
from Genoa.
Yeah, which is what's interesting. Someone like Columbus, you would think you would know everything about him, have pictures of him and so on. No, like he's kind of, some people think that he might have been a Jewish family, Genoa, they don't quite know. It's very interesting. He's a very mysterious man.
I've been to his so-called house.
Where, in Genoa?
In Genoa. My father's from Genoa.
Yeah, compared to, yeah, you'd think that you'd have a big place. All right. Well, it looks like we better stop here. We're out of time, right?
Thank you.
All right, well, sorry to bore you. I'll try to come up with something interesting for next week.